All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to decode one of the most important books ever written, Adam Smith's 1776 masterpiece, The Wealth of Nations. And I'm not exaggerating when I say this book literally rewrote the rules for how we think about money, about markets, and about what really makes a country wealthy. So, what is the real secret to a wealthy nation? For ages, the answer seemed obvious, right? It was all about the gold, piles and piles of it in the king's treasury. A bigger hoard meant a richer country. But Adam Smith comes along and says, nope, you've got it all wrong. He believed the true source of wealth was something way more active, something you couldn't just lock up in a vault. And to prove his point, Smith does something brilliant. He doesn't start with some grand abstract theory. He just asks us to look at something super simple, something a common worker might wear. A plain, coarse linen shirt. You might be thinking, a shirt? What's the big deal? Well, as it turns out, what's hiding inside that one simple shirt is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, just look at this list. It's wild. Of course, you need the shepherd who raised the sheep for the wool. That makes sense. But then you need the miner digging up ore to make the tools. You need the person who cut down the timber to build the loom. You've got spinners, weavers, dyers, sailors for transport. The list just goes on and on. Smith's big insight here is that even the most boring, everyday object is the product of this massive, invisible web of people working together. Now, this giant web of teamwork, it isn't just a happy accident. Smith says it's all driven by one powerful economic idea, an idea that he believed was the true engine of all prosperity. He called it the division of labor. It sounds kind of formal, but the idea is actually super simple. Instead of having one person try to do everything, raise the sheep, shear it, spin the wool, weave the cloth, and sew the shirt, you break that huge job down into tons of little tiny tasks, and each worker just focuses on becoming an expert at their one thing. And here's where the magic happens. It creates this incredible chain reaction. Think about it. If your only job is to do one tiny part of the process, you're going to get ridiculously fast and good at it, right? You're not wasting a single second switching between tasks or trying to remember how the next step works. And when you multiply that efficiency across hundreds of workers, boom, production just skyrockets. A few people specializing can create way, way more than if they all tried to do everything themselves. Okay, so specialization is amazing for making lots of stuff, but it creates a whole new problem, doesn't it? If you're the town baker and that's all you do, how do you get meat for dinner or a beer after work? You can't just eat bread for every meal. The answer is trade, of course. You trade your bread for some meat. Simple. But as Smith points out, it gets complicated, fast. He uses this great phrase, saying that barter can get clogged and embarrassed. What if you, the baker, want some meat, but the butcher just bought a ton of bread yesterday? He doesn't need any more. You're stuck. The whole system just stops. So what makes it all work then? What keeps the baker baking fresh bread every single day? Well, this is where Smith drops one of the most famous lines in all of economics. He says it's not from the kindness of the butcher or the baker that we get our dinner, but from their own self-interest. The baker isn't getting up at 4 a.m. because he loves you. He's doing it to make a living. And Smith's big point is that this self-interest is a far more reliable engine for society than just hoping everyone is nice. And this is where it gets really amazing. Let's scale this up. You've got millions of people, all just looking out for number one. The butcher, the baker, the software developer, everyone just doing their own thing to get ahead. Logically, that should be total chaos, right? A complete free-for-all. But it's not. And Smith's explanation for why it's not is maybe the most famous idea he ever had. He argued that when each person is just trying to do what's best for themselves, they are led by an invisible hand to achieve a result that's good for everybody, even though that was never their goal. Now, this invisible hand isn't some magical force. It's his powerful metaphor for how the free market, all by itself, takes our individual selfish motivations and channels them into something good for the whole community. It's a pretty incredible paradox when you stop and think about it. Your intention is purely selfish. I want to make a profit. But the result is social. Why? Because to make that profit, you have to create something that other people actually want to buy. You have to provide value. And in the process of chasing your own gain, you unintentionally end up making society better off. You create products, you create jobs, you contribute to the nation's overall wealth. So, let's connect the dots here. If all this productive activity, this making and trading and specializing, is the real engine of wealth,
Then that old way of thinking, just counting up a king's gold coins, it's not just a little off, it's completely backward.
Smith just flipped the whole script. The old idea, mercantilism, saw wealth as a fixed pie. There's only so much gold in the world, so for my country to get richer, your country has to get poorer. It was a zero-sum game. But Smith said no. Wealth isn't a static pile of stuff you hoard, it's a flow. It's the total of everything a country produces in a year. It's not about what you have, it's about what you can make. And that means we can actually bake a bigger pie for everyone. So when you buy something, that linen shirt or a cup of coffee, where does your money actually go? Smith breaks it down into three basic streams. Part of it goes to the workers as wages for their labor. Part of it goes to the business owners as profit on their investment. And the last part goes to the landowners as rent. That's pretty much it. That's how the value we all create gets distributed throughout the entire economy. When you put all this together, you get what Smith called an obvious and simple system of natural liberty. Basically, just let people pursue their own interests. But, and this is a really important but, it's not anarchy. It's not a total free-for-all. For this whole system to work properly, Smith said the government, or what he called the sovereign, has a few very specific and very important jobs to do.
And what are those jobs? Well, there are just three main ones. First, protect the country from outside threats, national defense. Second, run a fair justice system so people's property is safe and contracts are enforced. And third, the government has to build the big stuff that benefits everyone but isn't profitable for any one person or company to build. Think roads, bridges, canals. So the government's role isn't to run the show, but to act as the referee, setting the rules and making sure everybody plays fair.
And that brings us to the big question for us, here and now. Adam Smith wrote all of this back in the 1700s. Our world today, with global supply chains, the internet, and incredibly complex financial markets, is a whole different ballgame. So what would his simple system of natural liberty even look like now? In our world, is that invisible hand still guiding us? Or have things just gotten too complicated? That's definitely something to chew on. Thanks for digging into this with me.